So this hand is pretty close on the draw against an unknown opponent. It's a little land heavy, but we do have the big payoff card in Free Jam Regent. And if we draw some spells in our first few turns, then we could wait and cast the Ballista, say on turn 4 for value. And if we don't draw spells that we can cast, we can just run out the Ballista for 2. And if we just keep drawing lands, like whatever, I mean, that's the one fail scenario of this hand, if we just keep drawing a bunch of lands. But you can't base your mulligan decision on assuming worst case scenario when you're flooded, that you're just going to draw more lands. So you have to assume we're going to draw, a pretty even ratio of lands and spells at this point, or more spells than lands, because we only have we have a lot more spells than lands in our deck. So the math comes out to be, say, our next 5 draw steps. Our first 5 turns are going to be like at least 3 spells. So on turn 5, when we're looking to cast the Free Jam Regent, we will have drawn 3 spells. Well, that's perfect because we have a Ballista and then 3 other things that we want to do. So this hand on the draw, we are mathematically likely to cast a spell each turn. And both of these cards play well as late game cards, and the Ballista can play earlier as well, depending on what we're up against. So this isn't a great hand, but I think it's barely a keep. I wouldn't fault someone for mulliganing, but this deck in general is not the best at mulliganing because it's reliant on certain pieces coming together, like goggles and having the artifacts to improvise. And sometimes you just mulligan into hands that are like double Glory Bringer, Free Jam Regent, Ballista, 2 lands, and you just can't keep those hands. So I think this hand is good enough to keep. As it turns out, we are playing against what looks like an energy deck. And we did draw a couple spells, and we're going to start with the Ballista because we do have a turn 3 play. And it looks like it is Sultai Energy, the deck Seth Manfield just won the Pro Tour with. This happened before he won the Pro Tour, but certainly a deck that you should expect to face moving forward. Opponent has a pretty good draw. Not great, since this is turn 4 for them, but it looks like they're holding up Blossoming Defense. I think that's why they took a turn off, because they're curving out, but they're curving out a turn late. We drew basically a free goggles here, so we get to resolve the goggles and cast the Free Jam Regent. Now the opponent's trying to go on offense. We can afford to take a hit. We don't want to lose our Free Jam Regent. They don't have a lot of answers to a big dragon, and fortunately we have a second big dragon. So their answers to dragons are Vraska's Contempt, which I believe Seth ran 2 of, and Brad Nelson ran 0. So really, some lists, like if they were on Brad's list, I believe their only real answer is Hostage Taker. And if you Hostage Taker a dragon, that means the whole next turn is going to be used on trying to cast the dragon, and they need to have a land to even cast the Free Jam. But basically at this point, we don't have the luxury of trying to play around everything. We're basically in a race situation where we want to basically jam with our dragons and deal the opponent a bunch of damage, and then probably try to set up some chump blocks on the ground so we don't die, especially in the cub, so they can't just get infinite energy. But really we want to not have our dragons removed. And even if they do have a card like Vraska's Contempt, they're probably going to choose the Glory Bringer at this spot because it's about to eat one of their creatures. And then the Free Jam can basically kill them in essentially 2 to 3 turns. And if they kill the Regent, then the Glory Bringer gets to eat one of their creatures, and then we're just pretty firmly ahead, especially considering we have a 3rd dragon in hand. So we're just going to basically jam our dragons and see what happens. They let us attack, so it leads me to believe they don't have it. And then actually what we did, which is kind of interesting, so we did not actually exert the Glory Bringer. And the reason we did that, because if you look at the math, we can just kill them in 2 hits. And if they're letting us attack with the Glorybringer, it means they don't have the Vraska's Contempt in hand, which means the dragons are going to connect, and they're likely going to connect the following turn unless the opponent is able to play a hostage taker on one of the dragons. And if they do, they can't cast a dragon, so the other dragon's going to get through. So if they take the free jam regent, then the Glorybringer can kill the hostage taker and unlock our free jam. And we could also just play another free jam. If they don't play hostage, if they hostage take the Glorybringer, then the free jam is basically just going to kill them now, because we have 4 mana to pump into it, so that's 8, and the opponent's at 8. So there's really no reason to exert the Glorybringer in that spot. And doing so kind of opens ourselves up to Blossoming Defense, where we exert the Blossoming Defense to save their creature, and now we're on the back foot. Our dragon doesn't untap. The opponent is now only on a 3-turn clock instead of a 2-turn clock, and now they're going to be able to damage us in the race situation. So now if they have like a hostage taker for our free jam regent and our Glorybringer's tapped, then the following turn they can cast the free jam regent. Now we're actually in a position where the boards are pretty even. So that's why we didn't exert the Glorybringer there. When they let us attack, the card that really glaringly stood out to me was Blossoming Defense. So that's, if Blossoming Defense didn't exist, we would definitely exert and just kill their creature. Like, that board position is better for us, but the existence of that card as a 4-of in this deck is why we're playing around that. So now the opponent, of course, set up the race, put us on lethal next turn, and they play the hostage taker as expected, and they take our free jam. And now, again, we do not exert because there's that Blossoming Defense that we're playing around. So the dragon here can put the opponent down to 4. If we exert, then it doesn't untap next turn. The Blossoming Defense, the hostage taker. We play the free jam regent. We have 2 blockers. Then the free jam can maybe kill them next turn, but it kind of puts us on the back foot. Whereas here, we attack, put the opponent to 4, play the free jam. We have chump blockers for their creatures, and if they play the free jam, then we have 2 lethal attackers, and they're just dead. So they can't just play the free jam on their turn, or they're just dead on board. So they have to find an answer to both our dragons without casting the dragon underneath the hostage taker in the spot. And they only have 2 cards in hand, and the one that we're assuming is in hand is Blossoming Defense. So we just don't want to open ourselves up to losing this game to Blossoming Defense. So we again attack, no exert, and we play a creature. Sweet. Play land, and then we play free jam regent, improvising with our 2 artifacts. So now we have basically 3 blockers. Let's see what happens here. They obviously don't attack with the hostage taker. They attack with their other 2 creatures. The Long Tusk Cub is almost lethal, and with the Blossoming Defense, it is lethal. Whereas the Rishkar, it requires double Blossoming Defense to be lethal. So again, we kind of want to leave both our dragons in play, because that's what makes our play lethal and allows the just playing the free jam off the hostage taker to not be enough. So let's see what we do here. We just block both creatures like that. If they play Blossoming Defense on the Rishkar, great, you killed our swooper, didn't really care about that creature. Okay, this creature's getting chumped, great, who cares? And now we have 2 lethal dragons. So if you play the dragon, we just attack with both our dragons, and whichever one you don't block kills them. And so they have to have something other than the free jam. And when they're down to so few cards, it's like, well, you got to have basically 2 answers to free jam to our dragons. And there aren't really 2 cards in that deck off of 6 mana that can deal with 2 dragons. So here we just refused to get blown out by Blossoming Defense. We never actually saw the card because we never gave the opponent an opportunity to use it effectively. If we exerted the Glorybringer, things could have ended up a lot differently with the Blossoming Defense, because now here our Glorybringer doesn't untap, and they cast the free jam, and the free jam can trade with our free jam, and then things just aren't going according to plan. But as it stands, we just never needed to do that. We just killed them with dragons in the air without ever exerting. So that was game 1. Game 2. So, oh yeah, the way we sideboarded. So against Sultai, Bomat Courier is kind of one of our worst cards. I wouldn't fault someone for siding out all 4. I tend to leave 1 in just because like 4 goggles isn't quite enough. 1 mana artifact plays, and you really want to cast Thopterist on turn 3 if you can. So I left in like 1 Bomat Courier. I sided out a couple of Glory Bringers on the draw because against Sultai it's a little slow and they'll usually have their stuff going on. And as you saw that game, I often don't even want to exert it if they have open mana because of Blossoming Defense. So like a 5 mana 4/4 haste flyer is fine, and especially when you can exert it to force a card out of their hand. It's good if you can, if they don't have Blossoming Defense up. But I think that that's just kind of our next worst card, especially on the draw. So I took those out, and I put in a Braid, which is our best card because it deals with Hostage Taker or Cub or Glint Sleeve Siphoner, basically any of the creatures that we care about, including the Snake. Spray only kills a turn 2 Cub if they have no Attune on turn 1. It can kill the Siphoner, that's an important one, and it can sometimes kill a Walking Ballista, but it doesn't have a lot of targets, so we only brought in 2, and those are on the draw, and we might even side them back out on the play because really the only good target for them is the Siphoner. So yeah, that's basically how we sideboard there. We took out some Couriers and some Glory Bringers, put in a couple Sprays and the Abrades. And now, so this hand we keep, almost like the previous hand, we're a little hesitant because again, 5 lands, not exactly what we're looking for, but it does have turn 2 interaction, and it's the interaction that we really want because it can kill any of their turn 2 plays. And then it's followed up with a strong turn 3 play in the Virtuoso. So then at that point we just need to draw spells. There's a good spell. That's a good start. The opponent does have the Snake, which of course they're going to have a turn 2 play. They don't have a turn 3 play, which is interesting. We still want to go with the Virtuoso. They steal it. Unfortunately, we don't have the mana to cast the Glorybringer this turn, so they get to resolve our Virtuoso before we can kill their Hostage Taker. Little unfortunate. We draw yet another land, and now we get our Glorybringer. They don't have a green up, so we get to kill their thing. We're going to choose the Virtuoso and the Thopters trade. Now we're in okay position, depending on what they cast here. Alright, Naked Cub. Great, we drew Thopterist. We're in this thing. We have a Thopterist, we have Glorybringer. They need something big. They need to... Hostage Taker, that's a good one. Take our dragon. Just have a couple lands in hand. If we can draw a removal spell here, we're in great shape. They only have 1 card in hand. Nope, we drew a creature. Alright, so hopefully they don't cast that Glorybringer. I can't imagine they wouldn't. But, can't beat us with their own cards. Gotta beat us with our cards. I guess that's how a Hostage Taker works. Drew an Inventor's Goggles. Not great. Now here comes... Nope, still not the dragon. Rather Ballista. Nope, still didn't draw a removal spell. Double blocking the Virtuoso. Sure, whatever. Trade with the Cub. Not even trade. The Ballista is going to finish it off. Since the Ballista is about to finish it off, do we want to move over the Goggles? Nope. Let it finish it off. We could have equipped, but we're going to sack a Ramunap Ruins instead. Now they cast our dragon. Start beating us down with our dragon. Take it. Sack a land of the Ruins. Go to 9. Untap. Hey, we drew a creature. Still not a removal spell. They have a removal spell for a Fatal Push for our creature. Try to chip in some damage. Our only hope is to race at this point. It's a glimmer of hope. Not much, but they're not exerting the dragon, which is probably a good idea. Now they're just pumping up the ballista, shoot down our Thopters basically, so we can't chump block the Glorybringer the following turn. Yep, kill our Virtuoso. We kind of baited them into using counters off the ballista to give us another turn. Now, yeah, we're just basically dead at this point. Like, we drew too many lands and only one removal spell. If we'd drawn a second removal spell kind of at any point to deal with that second hostage taker, I think we win this game. If we get to get our Glorybringer back and we have the Glorybringer instead of them, I think that we can take over this game. But as it turns out, the opponent was able to use it against us and kill us. So that was game 2. For game 3, I believe we keep everything the same. I don't think I want sprays. Again, spray doesn't really kill anything that we want to kill. It can kill, you know, a glint sleeve siphoner or whatever. We could bring in a Glorybringer back in if we wanted to, but all right. So game 3. Yeah, this hand is definitely a keep because we have the turn 1 goggles, we have our turn 2 artifact, then all we have to do is find a third land to cast turn 3 Thopterist, which is really good in this matchup. And if we don't find a third land, then the chances of us finding a 1 or 2 mana play that is either an artifact or can produce an artifact, like the Ether Swooper or the Ether Chaser, is very high. So the likelihood of this hand coming together is extremely high, and when it does, it's a pretty good hand. So we definitely keep this, and we do find the third land. So we just run out turn 1 artifact, turn 2 artifact, then turn 3 we get a free goggles. Then exert the Thopterist. Now this is pretty bonkers. We have a 4/5, or not a 4/5, a 4/6, and a pair of 1/1 flyers on turn 3. So good luck getting that cub big enough. Yeah, I don't think you're attacking into that 4/6. Now we swing because we're about to move all those goggles over, so we just get a huge chunk of damage. And we decided to only move 1 goggles over because that's still big enough to ward off the cubs unless they waste a blossoming defense, in which case we're perfectly fine with that trade. Here they are trading a cub for our creature, which again we're fine with because we're moving the goggles over to the new one anyway. So we're super happy making these trades. Fatal Push for our creature, sure. Long Tusk Cub, alright, bring it. We have all these Thopters, now we can start winning in the air. Especially with Pia about to come down. So we're not really worried about taking damage, we're at 17. Alright, so they took our Maverick Thopterist, that's reasonable. Now here, so this is an interesting situation. Basically, our goal this game is to just fly over in the air. And since they stole our Maverick Thopterist, we have to believe that the following turn, their play is likely going to just be Maverick Thopterist. So what's the thing we can do on our turn that puts us in the best position to beat their plan if their plan is to just cast Thopterist next turn? And I determined that the best line to take here is to just equip one of the Thopters, attack for basically 4 points of damage, putting the opponent down to like 5 life or something, and then we improvise, tapping the rest of our things, both the goggles, a ballista, and a Thopter, to play Free Jam Regent for just 2 mana. It's pretty insane, right? A Shivan Dragon for 2 mana, basically. And so now, if the opponent plays the Thopterist and makes 2 Thopters, we can just pay 4 mana, to put a second counter on the Ballista, shoot down both the Thopters, and then attack in the air with free jam and all our Thopters. And they're just dead. So they have to be able to deal with our free jam region on the following turn, and also all these flyers. And it seems as though Maverick Thopterist is their only plan to deal with our flyers, and that plan doesn't work against the Ballista. So they have to either kill the Ballista and play the Thopterist to jump block our free jam for a turn and trade with the Thopter, and then still do something the following turn to try to deal with the free jam region, or they're just dead to the Ballista. So that was what we did there. They attack, definitely not blocking. I'll take all the damage you want to give me. I'm at 17, don't care. And they see that they can't afford to just play the Thopterist because they just have a tapped land. If they tap out for Thopterist, they're just dead on board to the Ballista. So they just left mana untapped, hoping, I guess, that something, it's like, well, don't leave yourself dead on board. See what they got. I'm just like, great, I'll attack with everything except the Ballista. What do you have? Hey, you have Vraska's Contemptor creature. Great. All right. Take 5, go to 2, pump the Ballista, kill you. Yeah. So they just couldn't deal with everything, basically. And I think they were correct. Instead of leaving themselves dead on board to the Ballista, at least deal with the dragon. Maybe I make a bad attack and leave too many creatures back. So then the opponent, like, if I just attack with the Ballista there, they can block with a hostage taker, and then we just, like, shoot them or whatever. Maybe we don't attack with all our Thopters. Maybe we leave a Thopter back, in which case we're 1 point short of lethal and the opponent gets another turn. So yeah, I mean, like, the opponent didn't make any mistakes. They just couldn't deal with our stuff. And then game 3. Wait, was that just game 3? Oh, wait, I'm just replaying the same game now. Okay, so that was game 3. We, yeah. So just a little replay of that game 3. Yeah, drawing that goggles on turn 3 was pretty sweet. So just a free roll there, because we were going to play the Thopterist anyway, and instead we were just able to play the goggles and the Thopterist for 2 mana and exerting or improvising. So anyway, yeah, that was Sultai energy. I guess if you get these types of draws, it's hard for them to deal with our go wide plan, and as long as we have answers to the hostage taker in the form of Glorybringer or a Braid, it's really hard for them to deal with our large threats and our wide aerial assault. So that's basically how we win this matchup.